From Square 2, this is What's Wrong with Revenue. I'm Mike Lieberman, CEO at Square 2, and along with my longtime friend Eric Kalis and co-founder at Square 2 and six-time entrepreneur, Eric and I will answer the questions CEOs have every single day: what's wrong with revenue? You can be part of the live cast show where we'll answer your questions every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern, or catch the show on demand on YouTube and on all your favorite podcast networks. Also, check out all our audio and video content on Square 2 Plus at the square2marketing.com website. Enjoy the show. Hey everybody, welcome to What's Wrong with Revenue. I'm Mike Lieberman. I'm joined by my longtime friend and business partner, Eric Kalis, in his man cave, so nicely decorated. I'm afraid one day I'm going to find you hanging in the corner.
I love this little man cave.
Today, we're going to be talking about you're not setting your goals correctly. So what's wrong with revenue? You may not have anything wrong with it, but you may not actually know what your goals are. You may be setting them incorrectly. They may be too high. They may be too low. We're going to try to cover all of that today with Eric. The housekeeping that we always do, What's Wrong with Revenue, is available on all of your favorite audio and video platforms. You can check us out on YouTube. Go to the Square 2 Marketing channel, and you can catch all of the What's Wrong with Revenue live cast episodes there. Like us, subscribe. You'll get notifications when we post new episodes there. You can check us out on Square 2 Plus, the new streaming service Square 2 hosts on our website, square2marketing.com/Square2PLUS, where we have all of our audio and video content, including every episode of What's Wrong with Revenue. You can get it there. And if you're into podcasts, the episode will be available tomorrow morning on all your favorite podcast platforms. So what are we going to do today? We're going to talk about how most companies leave high-level goal setting to the CEO or the leadership team. And in many cases, and certainly Eric and all of my experiences, they don't always ask outside resources to participate in it. They most of the time go, look, we did 20 million last year. We definitely should be able to do 25 million this year. Our competitor did 50, so let's shoot for 40. And really, that's kind of how it gets done. Unfortunately, that doesn't always mean they have the right resources, doesn't always mean they have the right investment to do it. It obviously wasn't calculated based on any kind of science. It was a lot of kind of gut and feel. And there are generally quite a few limiting factors that might make that $40 million goal fairly unattainable. So we're going to try to break that down today. We're going to talk about some ways in which you could think a little differently about your goal setting. We're going to answer some questions like we always do. And hopefully when we're done, your organization will be a little better prepared to set some goals going forward. So Eric, anything you want to add to kick us off?
People ask me literally every week, hey, Eric, how much should I spend on marketing? And I say, I don't know. What are your goals? And I think today is a perfect way to answer that question for everybody.
Awesome. So let's just get right into it. We do a lot of help with prospects and clients when it comes to goal setting and when it comes to figuring out the marketing budget, because generally it's a pretty direct relationship between the marketing budget and the goals. If you have big goals and a small marketing budget, I think your chances of hitting your goals are probably pretty small. So there's a direct relationship between budget and goals. So when people ask you, I know they're asking you about budget, but when they ask you about goals, how do you advise them to move away from guessing, like we talked about at the opening, into something a little more scientific, if you will?
Well, we deal primarily in mid-market and entrepreneurial firms. So there are those firms that are doing like 10 to 100 to $200 million, somewhere in there. They're really good at what they do, but they're not quite mature in their sales and marketing efforts quite yet. So Mike, I just want to push back. Very few people actually come to us with their goals. They usually say, I want to get more leads. And then I say, well, how many more leads do you want to get? And that starts the conversation around goal setting. Now, typically when I say, well, how much do you want to grow? people will say, I want to double my business. It seems to be the standard answer. So I go, well, no problem. How long did you set for a time horizon to double your business? Because if it's tomorrow, chances are it's not going to happen. But if it's like, hey, we're on a 3-year plan to double our business, great. Now we can start to get into some of the meat. I would say for the most part, you're right. People just pick numbers. They're not very scientific about goal setting. And they certainly don't break it down into granular chunks of what needs to happen along the buyer's journey, what increases need to be made in order to attain that final growth number. So I think there's a lot of like throwing darts, if you know what I'm saying. And that's like a bad thing. There's so many things to business. Not everybody could be an expert goal setter, but I think that when you have realistic expectations about where your business can go and a decent, not fat, but like a decent budget to start to execute that, you can really start to align where you want to go and then how the activities that you need to do align with that goal setting.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that the objectives around coming up with realistic goals has to be rooted in some kind of science, right? And I know we've done this with some clients before where, they might say, to your point, I want to double my business. So I did 10 million last year and I want to do 20 million this year, right? Okay, great. How much of that 10 million is reoccurring, right? How much of that 10 million can we count on this year? And generally, no business can count on all of the revenue that they did last year, right? Hardly anyone has a business model where there's no attrition. So, maybe they can count on 8 out of the 10 million going into the next year, right? Well, now they actually need 12 million in new business, not 10 million in new business. They want to get to 20, right? So that's the first thing that I think people should think about. I rarely hear people talk about that. Then you have to start thinking like, okay, well, where is that 12 million going to come from? How much of that is going to come from current customers? Because we talk about this a lot. There's a lot of revenue buried in current customers that really isn't mined properly by most of the companies that we come in contact with. So of that $12 million, how much do they think they can get from current customers? Maybe it's 2 million, right? Now they're back to 10. So if they need 10 million, how many new clients is that? And the client they get in December is going to contribute a lot less to that $10 million goal than the client they get in January. So what is the flow of that new client intake going to be over the course of 12 months? Like those are some ways to start putting a little bit of science to these objectives. Like how many leads do you need to close $10 million in new business? Like that could be an astronomical amount of leads and the business is not equipped to even handle that amount of leads to get to that. So I think starting to look at some of the numbers like that is going to be a really good way to decide whether the goal is realistic or not, and then potentially even put some thought into what a realistic goal might be. Does that make sense?
It sure does. I mean, even you and I had a little bit of this exercise when we were offered to sponsor an entrepreneur conference. And we were like, well, how much is it? And how many people are coming? And how many days is it? And how many people do you think will stop by our booth? And how many people will be in your breakout session? We started to really drill down into some of the smaller numbers to come up with something we felt comfortable with. And then we even cut it in half. From the last episode, the blow your smoke up your skirt issue.
Right.
And cutting that in half to make sure that we're not like fooling ourselves. And it all worked out. So we move forward. But like, I'm not sure that a lot of people will take the time to kind of like whiteboard that out and see how many leads they actually need to get there. Mike, I have a great slide I'd love to share to start the conversation today. Would that be okay?
Yeah. Can you share your screen?
Sure can. All right. So this is a slide that when we're talking to prospective clients, sometimes they can really grab onto. And I thought that this would be a good way to start today's conversation. So net of attrition. This is a very simple exercise on how you can grow your business with new business. If you want to set goals, you simply need 3 pieces of information. The first one is, how much do you want to grow? The second one, how much will a good client spend in the course of the first year? And the third one is, what's your close rate? Or in other words, for every 10 deals you pitch, how many end up doing business with you? In this simple example, we have a company that wants to go from their current $10 million in revenue to $12 million by the end of the year. So they're looking for a $2 million increase in revenue. If we take that $2 million and we divide it by the average engagement size of $25,000 per client, it means we need approximately 80 new clients. But wait a minute, we have a 50% close rate. So we have to double that in order to understand that we really need 160 sweet sales opportunities to have our sales team close half. Now, what people don't understand is if you need 160 sales opportunities, you have to apply a rule of thumb of somewhere around 3 to 5 times the amount of total leads that you get over the course of the year. Because not all leads will be qualified. Some people won't be a good fit for your company. Some people won't have the budget to work with you. Some people will be downright jerks that you reject on a culture perspective. So if you think about it like a fishing analogy, you need a big enough fishing net to catch a lot of little fish and a lot of big fish. Happy to throw back the little fish as long as you get your 160 big fish in this example. So in this case, we would target building a marketing program that would generate 400 to 600 total leads over the course of the year, understanding that 160 of those will probably be qualified sales opportunities that we could turn over to the sales team and they'll close half and we'll get to our goal. Now, when you boil this down, 400 to 600 leads might sound like a lot over the course of the year, but when you divide it by the 252 workdays in the United States, it's 1 or 2 leads a day. And that's where you now start your initial metric. Did we get 2 leads today? Are we consistently averaging 1.5 leads a day over the course of the month? And that's where you can start to build up from that number. Also, how many leads, the 400 to 600 has to be divided by channels. How many will we get from referrals? How many will we get from SEO? How many will we get from our paid ad campaign? What about our speaking engagements that we do and our participation in that conference next week? All of those have to be calculated so that you have a realistic understanding of exactly where those numbers are coming from. If I know that I need 400 to 600 leads over the course of the year, let's say we cut it down the middle, 500 by 52, how am I going to generate those 100 leads every single month? Does that make sense, Mike?
Yeah, it's a really good example. So if I need 600 leads, that's 50 a month, right? That's
Yep.
So if I'm only getting 25, you're kind of saying like my $12 million goal might be too aggressive.
Or do I have enough budget to amp up my marketing to take?
Well, that's the second, right? That's the second part of the question is, what do I now need to spend to double the amount of leads I'm getting? And if I'm going to get another $1 million in incremental revenue going from 11 million to 12 million, how much of that am I willing to invest to drive that extra $1 million in business? That's the process they should be thinking through, right?
Well, yeah, but think about it this way also. Let's say this company in this example wanted to go from 10 million to $20 million in revenue. All of these numbers would be 5 times as large, and you need a much more robust marketing program to pull that off. So this is where you start to really quantify what's happening and set, I'll say, more realistic goals as opposed to just picking numbers out of the air.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I wanted to just circle back real quickly to something you said earlier. You know, we do ask clients about goals very frequently, and sometimes those are even much shorter term goals than we're talking about here. Like we ask pretty much every single prospect, you know, what are your goals for the next 30 days if you're going to be working with? What are your goals for the next 90 days if you're going to be working with us? And people have trouble answering that. So, you know, if that's one of their challenges, how do you suggest they start looking at bigger picture goals like you just outlined there?
Well, you know, I actually don't think it's bigger picture. It's like little picture, right? Hey, if I say I'm going to hire a marketing agency or bring in some contractors or whatever, I have to do the calculations of if I'm going to spend $100,000, just to pick numbers out of the air once again, how many leads can I add on to my lead flow from that original investment? Because if you're bringing on the typical, oh, we'll get a college intern and they'll do our social media posts, you have to say to yourself, okay, sound strategy, how many qualified leads will I get from that? And if the answer is, well, gee, I don't know, like social media, our target personas on social media, is this the right, who's going to create the content? Do I have to pay to have, like it starts a big conversation around planning. And I really feel that a lot of people, they just don't take a half an hour and kind of whiteboard out, well, what do we need to do to double our lead flow? In that example, you're right. if we were to say, well, this is too aggressive, what if we just need to add $1 million in revenue, not two? Okay, well, let's hire an SEO firm to double our traffic to our website over 12 months. And let's also all pitch in and write some more content that we can offer on our website, which then we can offer on calls to action to convert those new visitors. And let's use some historic numbers. How many of those conversions did we actually turn into sales opportunities, and start there? And if that mathematic works out to be positive, because you're right, like the business side of this conversation is, if I generate $10 million in revenue, I'm sorry, an extra $1 million in revenue, and I have a 10% net profit margin, that means I'm going to throw 100,000 to the bottom line. Well, am I willing to invest 50,000 of that in marketing to get that? Maybe not. Maybe that's like I did all that work just to generate 50, or am I playing the long game? Well, let's see. Rather than just look at it from $25,000 in revenue per year, the lifetime value of one of our clients is more like $400,000. And I think about it that way, like, okay, would I spend $50,000 in marketing this year to generate 400,000 times X amount of clients for the next 5 years? Now that's a whole other conversation about lifetime value versus initial engagement. So, these are the, strategic conversations that leadership teams have to roll up their sleeves and dive into if they're going to make some investments in marketing and sales, advertising, public relations, things that actually cost real dollars.
That is how they should look at it. I mean, you have to look at lifetime value. You can't look at just the money you're getting in 1 year. If typically your clients stay with you and spend the same amount of money over the course of 5 or 6 years, or even longer, like you have to look at the lifetime value for that client, because you may invest some money this year to get it, but you're not going to have to invest any money next year to keep it, at least from a marketing perspective. So I think that's and honestly, I don't hear a lot of people talking about that lifetime value calculation when they talk about investments in marketing. It's always very short term. This year, what am I going to spend this year? What am I going to get this year? And maybe we don't introduce that idea to them enough, because I think that's the right way to look at it. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I actually read, God, it must be 2 or 3 months ago, I read this great article about customer service and lifetime value, right? And it was actually about dentistry, and how typically the person at the front desk at a dentistry office is indifferent to the patients and perhaps not so good at customer service. And they revealed a startling statistic that when a dentist lands a new patient, because people tend to be sticky about their dentist, typically the lifetime value of a dental patient, $250,000 over the course of that relationship. And the article made a funny joke. That is what I remembered. They said, if they got a rubber stamp and they stamped on the forehead of all the patients $250,000 to remind the people at the front desk what each patient is worth, they might have a different approach to customer service. And I thought that was so funny how, like, don't forget this person, even though they might be a little persnickety about scheduling their dental cleaning, or what do you call it? Your dental cleaning?
Yeah.
Right, dental cleaning.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, teeth cleaning. That is part of the 250,000 when they get a crown here and they have a root canal there and they go for the
Bonding.
Whitening.
Whitening.
No, the veneers, right? That are like $30,000 in one shot, stuff like that. So the point I'm trying to make is that lifetime value is often not considered and not even calculated in a lot of businesses. And Mike, just to throw myself on the sword, I've never calculated the lifetime value of a Square 2 client. Have you?
No. Well, I mean, we talk about it sometimes, but we don't really roll it into our calculations. Like
exactly. It's many generalities. So we have to be held accountable for ourselves as well.
Yeah. I mean, the dentist thing too is like, as the customer ages, their amount they spend goes up. So like in the beginning, they might be coming in once or twice a year and all they're getting is cleaning, and that's not a lot of revenue. But as they start to get older and they run into more problems, their teeth start to fall out, or they get more cavities, or they need a root canal, and then the bill really starts to stack up. That's probably a little hard for the receptionist to realize, right?
That's exactly right. But it's important for goal setting, because maybe I need half the amount of patients this year that I thought I needed, and then next year half of that, and it starts to build on itself over the course of the years.
Yeah. Well, it also talks to nurture. Like, I don't know about you, but my dentist never sends me anything other than it's time to come in for your cleaning. If they would nurture me a little bit about things I could do, or things I should be considering, or, maybe I would take an extra service or two. You know what I mean?
No, my dentist does a great job of nurturing. They send me a box of hard candy once a month. Is that a problem?
No, they're doing some good marketing. Yeah, let's circle back around to this idea of data, right? Like you mentioned it a couple of times. And today there's so much data available, so much performance data that can help you set goals. So you literally can find, if your marketing automation or even your Google Analytics, your tools are set up properly, you can go in and see how many people are coming to your website, how many people are converting into contacts, where they're coming from. So back to Eric's point, I'm getting, a certain amount of visitors from social. I'm getting a certain amount of visitors from organic. I'm getting a certain amount of visitors from my email or from my referral sites or backlinks that I've been doing. So, that helps. You can also then see how many of those people are turning into new contacts, and you should be able to see, if it's all set up properly, how many of those people are turning into customers. So, that data allows you to do some of the calculations that you've been talking about in a very scientific way. Like you literally could know how many leads you're getting from what source every single month. So, if you need 50 to get you that incremental $2 million in revenue, and you only have 25, you can see exactly where they're coming from, and you can lean into the best sources and focus your budget on those best sources and drive those up to get you to your nut, to go from 25 to 50. Bang, you're there, right? Should be that easy.
Yeah, exactly. But got to get all your data, got to kind of spill it out on the table, got to figure all that out.
Yeah. So this is, to me, the elephant in the room, right? We ask so many people, what's your marketing budget? And almost all of them to a T say, I don't know, right?
Yes.
What do you attribute that to? Like, how could they not know what their marketing budget is? Like when you put a budget together for a business, isn't there a line item that says marketing? I mean, it must have some number in it, right?
Well, yes and no. You're making a big assumption that companies are doing budgeting for company-wide budgeting. So maybe that's not even happening. And they're just kind of like, does this feel right? I don't know. I'm just spending willy-nilly. Remember, you have a lot of companies that run by the cash register. If there's money left over in the bank account at the end of the month, it was a great month. They didn't plan. They didn't have, how are we doing towards budget? What adjustments do we have to make midstream to make the numbers work out? So remember, we're dealing, once again, for our listeners, in the mid-market entrepreneurial world. It's a little bit different if we had a budget and we were, a $6 billion company. So I think the budgeting process is a lot of feel. Now, there's a second part to the revealing the budget that I think is important. Let's face it, marketing companies don't have the most sterling reputation. They are very good at marketing and sales. And then when they don't produce the results they promise in the sales process, there's usually a separation between the client and the agency. And that happens over time. And that is something we hear all the time. Yeah, I got burned by 2 other agencies. How do I know you guys aren't going to burn us too? So I think the skepticism in the generated by the experience that they had previously keeps that budget number that they're thinking about or have calculated close to the vest. They'll say, well, I really don't want to share my budget numbers. I'd love to see what you guys come up with and what your plan would be and how much that would be. And then I'd like to talk about budget, which is fair in some respects because you're giving us a blank slate to do whatever we would do based upon their goals and objectives. The challenge there is that people share their goals and objectives. I'd like to drive more website traffic. I'd like to convert more of those people on the website into my database. I'd like to nurture the heck out of those people and build a case why I'm the obvious choice to do business with. I'd like to turn those MQLs or marketing qualified leads into sales qualified leads. And I'd like to have my sales team close at least half of those when it comes down to it. So they have those expectations. They have those goals that they set. So all right, well, based upon where you are today, if you want to accomplish all those things, we need a pretty big program with a lot of moving parts, right? SEO for website traffic, new content for conversion. Then we have to have nurturing to turn those people from MQLs to SQLs. Then we have to support the sales team. All of that is a lot of sales and marketing work that obviously drives up the budget. But if we say, Mike, based upon your goals and objectives, we recommend you spend $85,000 over the course of the next year in order to accomplish that. And in their mind, they're thinking, well, I'll spend $25,000 on marketing. Now it opens up another problem, right? Well, I really was thinking about 25. Well, why didn't you tell us you had 25 originally? Then we would have prioritized and given you the 3 or 4 biggest bang for your buck activities that we could create. Now there's back and forth, and it turns into like a negotiation when it really should be a co-creation of the program together. If the client is transparent, I have no budget, I don't know what it is, but I'm feeling pretty comfortable about spending $37,500 this year. What can you do with that budget? I actually just had a prospect that said, we'd like to invest $20,000 to enhance our website. What do you think you can do for that kind of budget? I was like, this is great. I know exactly what they want to spend. And even though I would normally recommend 10 things, now I'm only going to recommend 7 to make sure that it fits in the budget. I'll put those other 3 things on the parking lot that when they get better results for their investment in their website, some of the profit that's generated from those new clients can maybe knock off some of the things on the parking lot. But it was such a refreshing conversation to lead with the money. About 2 months ago, we had a very nice prospect who said, here's what we want to do. We want to build a website. We have 41 locations. It has to have this, that, and the other thing. And our budget's 150. Tell us what we can do or not. You know what, Mike? Our quote came in for 120. And then we were saying, we're reserving this 30,000 for some extra projects that'll put the cherry on top. The fact that they led with the budget was so refreshing because once again, as you said earlier, 90% of the people like, I'm not quite sure, show me what you got.
Yeah. Even your articulation of their goals, they were all qualitative. More of this, more of that, more of this, more of that. No specifics. So we're kind of guessing in terms of what they need because we don't really have any real numbers behind it. We have no idea where they are now. We have no idea whether more means 100% more or 10% more. So again, the better the businesses can be with articulating the specifics of their current performance and their desire for future performance, the better the entire goal setting process is going to be, the better the entire budget setting process is going to be, the better their effort to go from point A to point B is going to be. Everything really gets better when they can be very specific about what they're trying to accomplish. All right.
And you know, quantitative, not qualitative is right. I don't want to gloss over that. That's so important because in marketing today, we can quantify everything. We have all the tools, we have all the reporting. There's no more like, I just want to get my name out there a little bit more.
Right. Yeah. I think people are more comfortable with the qualitative stuff than they are the quantitative stuff. Like we do ask a lot of quantitative questions in our discovery process. And I still am a little surprised how many clients don't know the answers to some of those questions. I mean, I know this is our business, but you want to know how many people came to our website? Like I can tell you almost down to the single digit, right? How many leads do we get? I can tell you. So I know it's our business and it's not theirs, but literally that's click a button and you can see it. Anybody should be able to answer that question pretty easily. And I'm still surprised at how many people are not able to answer that.
Mike, how many laptops do you project you need next year? And what's your total IT budget for 2023? Like, it's the same thing. Like, we don't know.
We actually have an IT budget for this year and we know how many laptops we have. I just don't have that information handy.
I know, but that budget that we made up for IT, we made up for IT. Well, you know what? Let's throw $2,000 a month in case we need a laptop.
All right. Well, stop making me feel bad about my IT.
No, but I'm saying like, if this was a person listening to this call that is in the IT space, they'd be like, well, IT is a business strategy. How come you don't have a handle on that? And that's because we're marketing people, just like our clients aren't marketing folks. They're doing whatever they do. And that's why it's a little bit,
I guess so.
Yeah.
But no one presented us a tool where I could see my IT budget and all my laptops and all the acts, you know, like who's doing what. If someone said to me, oh, I have this beautiful software that you could get a handle on that, I might be like, yeah, that would be great. But we do have that on the sales and marketing side.
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, now you said that I have a new project because it was like, what year what year is the laptop? Our lifetime value is 3.2 years. Here's your budget for next year to upgrade because we're constantly reactive and not proactive on our IT budget. And that's what we're encouraging the listeners today to be proactive on their marketing budget the same way.
Right. It's like the refrigerator commercial where the guy knocks on the door. He's like, yo, your refrigerator is about to break. They're like, what are you talking about? It's working fine. Like, no, it just emailed me that there's a compressor that's about to go down. You know, like it's the same thing. We should have that for all of our equipment. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Okay. Let's answer some questions because I got some good questions from people. So you're going to like this one. This is from Paige in New York City. My CEO sprung our revenue goals on us this year. How can I proactively work with her next year to set goals based on data instead of her whim?
Well, we talked a lot about that now, but I think number one is a planning exercise, right? Too many people are like, yeah, it's January 15th. We should really set our budget for the year. Meanwhile, you're already halfway through one of your precious 12 months and you haven't even talked about budgeting, right? So it's got to start, let's call September, October. Let's have some conversations. By then we have 9 months of data, what's going on in the year before, and we can start to extrapolate what's going to happen by the end of the year and start to talk about what's happening next year. We can mix in things like macroeconomic factors. We could mix in things like some of our staff, maybe perhaps we're worried about leaving our company. We'll talk about buying a new machine and how that'll open up capacity, and we want to fill that. So those kind of conversations have to start September, October. The other thing is the 5 whys. You ever hear that whole thing?
Yes.
When the CEO says, yeah, I want to double our sales. Well, why do you want to double your sales? Well, if we double our sales, we could double our profit. Well, why do we need to double our profit? And really keep drilling down into what we need to do. Because if we ask the 5 whys, by the time we get to the 4th or the 5th one, it starts to really quantify what the intention was of the CEO and why they wanted to grow. If I was in that meeting and the CEO said, I need to grow my revenue, we need more leads, I might push back and say, well, what if we did an aggressive campaign to our existing clients and doubled the spend of the people we already have in our roster of clients? Would that fulfill your needs? Because that would shift from attracting new people and spending money on awareness and conversion to nurturing existing clients. And I would have a completely different suite of tools that I would use for that, and probably have a much more modest budget when I have to market to my existing existing clients, then I have to go out and find new ones. So those kinds of key questions are what Paige should be using to talk to her CEO about what the planning should be next year, and start early.
Yeah, Paige, I think you got to start early, right? I'm pretty sure no CEO really wants to spring revenue goals on anyone, but maybe in this case, she felt like, well, no one else is working on this. I'm just going to take the initiative and tell everybody what our goals are going to be. I bet if you were able to get ahead of her and run some of the scientific calculations that Eric and I have been talking about and create some quantitative goals, you could go to her and say, hey, here's what I think we can do next year, based on our current performance and the money that I need for my marketing budget and what we're planning on investing in sales. I bet she would be very open to listening to your ideas about what the goals should be, and then taking those goals and presenting them to whoever else is on the leadership team. So I think you can get out ahead of her next year by doing a little bit of what Eric and I have been talking about in this session today.
Paige, I don't want to be direct, but if you're listening, I want to make sure you think about other areas too, right? Go to your VP of sales and say, hey, look, we have 14 salespeople. How many of them are hitting their monthly quota? Oh, 7 of them hit it consistently. Would you consider eliminating the 14th person on your list or the worst provider and rotating that $75,000 base salary into marketing so I could generate more qualified leads for the remaining 13? Like, there's a lot of ways to set goals and budgets without having to just spend money. Rotating funds, migrating funds, or I'll give you another example, Paige. Go to the CEO and say, these 3 tactics we invested in this year were not performing. I would like to eliminate those and rotate that money into areas that quantitatively show we're doing better. Now you could do the same amount of budget. You could do more lead gen with the same amount of budget.
That's good advice. So speaking of budget, I got another question here from Joanne in San Diego. She wants to know about really what her question is, what's an appropriate marketing budget? I've seen % of revenue. Is that right? So I know we talked about how to build the budget based on quantitative data, but she's really asking about other budget methodologies. You want to try to answer her question? Because I've also seen % of revenue. I don't know if that's right. I'm not a fan of % of revenue, but some people do use that for budget setting for marketing.
Hey, Joanne, using a percentage of revenue to set your marketing budget is dumb. It doesn't apply to anything. I've seen that hundreds of times, that people use that as a barometer or industry benchmarks. It's just, every company is individual. I never understand why people would go and do that. You have to figure out what's the goal, back out of the goal. What do we need to do to get there? Not just some random number. Our industry spends 4% of revenue. Okay, if that's the case, if you're a $10 million company and you're spending 4% of revenue, which would be $40,000, what about your competitor who's doing $20 million? They're spending $80,000. How are you going to outspend them? How are you going to catch up? You got to be smarter, right? Not just spend money based on some metric. I'd get that out of your head and use that methodology that I showed in the first few minutes of today's session as your starting point for a conversation about how much your budget should be.
Yeah, there is no appropriate marketing budget. It's kind of like, your cholesterol, right? Like everybody's different and everybody manages it differently. And some people are high and some people low, or some people are right
Wait a
in the
minute, Mike.
pocket.
Wait, if I'm a startup and I have no revenue, does that mean I should spend nothing on marketing? It's actually the opposite. I should spend a gigantic amount of revenue on marketing to get the wheels turning. So like, it doesn't even make sense. What if I'm a 100-year-old manufacturer that has clients that have been around for 75 years? Maybe I don't have to spend anything on marketing simply because, I have the momentum and I can just continue to nurture my existing. Like, it doesn't even make sense with that percentage of revenue thing.
Right. Agreed. Okay. So here's a good question from Jenny in Chicago. How do you recommend our leadership team set goals? She says specifically here, I'm not asking about the calculation part of it, but the collaboration piece. You talked a little bit about Paige, sitting down with the VP of sales and kind of reviewing performance around the sales reps, but how do you think the leadership team should go about setting goals? And this is actually has something to do with the CEO sprung revenue goals on Paige in the first question. Like, how can the leadership team work collaboratively to set goals for the company?
Well, I think it's like a divide and conquer kind of thing, right? Because if you're just starting out on this goal setting journey, you got to get a lot of data, and the leadership team can certainly help with that, right? You figure out this, I'm going to figure out that, Mary, you figure out this, right? We start to bring that data to the table. The one thing, though, that the leadership team should get behind would be some kind of marketing automation platform to start to consolidate some of this data analysis that could then be used for budgeting. Now, leadership has to buy into the fact that this is another piece of technology that we're investing in, but it'll help us. I mean, I couldn't see a subscription to SharpSpring, HubSpot, or Marketo, when used correctly, wouldn't pay for itself very quickly in the efficiencies that you're going to get with your sales and marketing program, right? Nobody is like, well, we didn't hit our sales target because Salesforce was too expensive, right? That just doesn't work. So I think that the leadership team has to buy into, I'll call it, new ways of thinking, new school ways of thinking about how sales and marketing go. The other thing that leadership has to participate in is eliminating the gut. And the reason I say that is because if you're at your leadership team meeting and you're like, oh yeah, we just got a new lead from a direct mail postcard we just sent out, the leadership team, without having the data, might, oh, we should do more postcards. When, let's just be honest, right? Like, buyer behavior dictates that direct mail is probably not the best place to spend your lead gen money. I have no problem with supporting other campaigns or being air cover for certain things or doing lumpy mail packages to prospects on an account-based marketing campaign. But if we happen to land someone from postcards, we have to say, well, let's look at postcards. We spent $5,000. How many clients did we actually get from it? Also, I think leadership has to be open-minded enough to do some testing. If you are a traditional advertiser and you're not getting the results you want, let's have leadership back up that we're going to really lean into testing. We do billboards. All right, well, let's try new messaging. Okay, well, if we have new messaging, let's try an offer on our billboards to drive them to the website to integrate old school and new school activities. Like, the leadership team has to be educated enough in what's going on in sales and marketing today in order to support the sales and marketing effort. I think that's a big place where they could start educating themselves, using some technology, get away from gut and using data, and kind of all the things that leading edge leadership team should be focused on.
I think data is really the secret to this. Who asked this question? Jenny, right? I think that the data is really the issue. If you're in a leadership team meeting and people are like, well, I think, or in my opinion, or in my past experiences, or this is what we used to do, this is what we've always done. I think those are some signals that the company needs to get behind the idea that you don't really need to make decisions anymore based on assumptions or opinions or perspectives. There are plenty of platforms, to Eric's point, that can be installed that answer all these questions for you. And all of it should be, let's look at the data, right? What should our goals be? Let's run through an exercise like Eric outlined in the beginning, right? It's very quantitative. It's very specific. It's very data driven. If you can support a certain amount of revenue from current clients, if you can support a certain amount of revenue from prospects based on the current performance of your marketing and lead generation efforts, if you're going to invest a certain amount of money and you can justify the lift in the performance from a prospect and lead generation perspective, then the goals should present themselves. It should actually be quite easy to use that data to have a collaborative goal setting process with everyone in every area. And I think the important takeaway here is every area is going to contribute to this, right? If, like I talked in the beginning about a company that does $10 million in business, but only $8 million of it is going to be reoccurring, right? Well, there's someone at that meeting responsible for customer service who could potentially work to make that only 9 million instead of 8 million, right? If you can save $1 million from an attrition or a retention program, that's a pretty big contribution to the goal that they're trying to achieve. And if the data can support, well, if we did these 3 things, I think I can take us from only doing 8 to doing 9. Well, now you have a legitimate goal. It's very specific. Do an extra $1 million in the retention or whatever, the revenue saving program around retaining current clients. Like each of the areas can contribute. That's customer service. And you have sales, you have marketing, right?
Well, I'll give you an operations example, Mike. Ready? Hey, marketing person, I'm Eric, the operations manager. I just wanted you to know we're taking delivery of a new manufacturing machine that will drive down our costs in half. I think that we could lower our prices to attract more customers because of our efficiencies with our new machine. How would that help you market and sell at a lower price, right? Like there's like how like the manufacturing side of the business can help sales and marketing by sharing that data. Maybe we just have an offer for the one product that slips through the system the best and the rest remain the same price, right? There's lots of ways, like you said, Mike, that they could collaborate on that, even though they're not in the sales and marketing departments.
Right. Well, if I know I can run a special promotion on price, that might allow me to generate more leads, right? Because there's going to be more people excited about getting our product at a better price than maybe they could get it historically. So you're right. That's
you could go the other way too. Our new machine will cut delivery time in half. Now you have something to promote. Get your stuff in 3 weeks, not 6 weeks at ABC Corp.
Right.
Find out more.
Right. Which should generate more leads, which helps us with our
If the
quantitative.
industry average is 6 weeks and you're coming to the table with 3 weeks, something interesting, something remarkable.
Right. So I think that's the way you want your leadership team to sit down and talk about goals and, get everyone contributing quantitatively to these goals and then roll them all up and agree that you're going to, be able to do this together. And this leads into a really interesting question that I wanted to make sure we had time for. This is right up your alley. Do you think any of the business operating systems like EOS helps with this issue? How would it help? This is from Sierra in Charleston. So this is very specific to what we're talking about. And you're kind of the entrepreneur in residence. So how does EOS, or what's the other one called? Scaling Up?
Yep.
How did they,
AKA Scaling Up.
Right, Scaling Up. How did those 2 systems help this leadership team kind of work together like we've been describing?
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned it because that puts a strategic planning backbone to the entire, basically, goal setting and budgeting process, right? So when you have EOS, which is the Entrepreneur Operator System, Gino Wickman, Traction, the book, if you're interested in more information on that. So what happens is you're setting not only your 10-year BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal, you're setting your 3 to 5 year plans, which includes quantitative things like revenues, customer counts, things, whatever is important to your company, then boils it down to what is our annual plan, boils it down to quarterly objectives, and then you're talking about individual initiatives or what's called rocks each quarter for all the leadership team members that roll down to their teams, right? So I hope I did the justice by explaining it in a very simple way. But adjacent to all of that planning are the metrics that go with that to make sure that you're on plan. So if you're like, hey, we're going to generate 300 leads this quarter, that's our goal, right? Not just to grow the business arbitrarily, but to generate 300 leads. Well, that's marketing's rock for that quarter. And now we can be red, yellow, or green against that initiative by checking in with some of the quantitative information we get from our marketing automation platforms to feed that one-page plan to make sure everybody's on the same page. From a collaboration point of view, if everybody is using the same one-page plan and it's divided by the divisions of the company, manufacturing understands what sales is doing and sales knows what finance is up to and finance knows what leadership is talking about. And it all comes together in a quite elegant and simple plan.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And we've seen companies install this and really move the business forward. And, it might sound like a lot of work, but, it's going to be much more effective than a lot of what we've been talking about today, which is people kind of flying by the seat of their pants and guessing what their revenue goals should be and arbitrarily setting them without data. This does nicely align and orchestrate all different parts of the company around a very specific plan, a very specific set of goals that are quantitative in nature. And now you have everybody kind of rowing in the same direction. That is how a lot of companies get significant, no pun intended, traction, right?
It's the Treasure Island thing, right? If I drop you on the Treasure Island with no map, take you forever to find that treasure. You have a map, you follow the map. Even if you're kind of following the map, you're just going to do better.
Yeah.
EOS and those kinds of strategic planning software frameworks enable you to have that map to get to where you want to go.
Yeah. And if you are interested in this, there are literally very specialized coaches that help companies learn EOS and scaling up, that will work very specifically with you and kind of help you set up the practices and the rituals that are all part of this system. And it does add a lot of value. If you're interested in it, you can just Google it. There's plenty of information out there. So Eric, I have a couple more questions before we wrap up for the show here. And these are interesting, so I want to make sure I get to them. What if we're 3 months into the year and it's obviously obvious we're not going to hit our goals? Do we change them? Do we run out the year missing them? What are the ramifications of badly set goals month after month? This is Mark in LA. It's a really interesting situation because I'm sure a lot of businesses run into this. If you're arbitrarily setting the goal, you could really find yourself behind the mark pretty quickly into the year. What do you think you should do?
Well, I don't think you should ride out the rest of the year on the original plan. You got to pivot. Like, without a doubt, you have to pivot because the data shows us we're not getting there. So what I might pull back there is if that initial data for the first 90 days is clearly indicating that, let's call it 10% of things are really working and 10% of things are really not working and everything's kind of average in between, we can start to make some pivots. Cancel the 10% things that aren't working, cancel half of the things that are average, rotate that investment into the things that are working so that you get yourself a little breather, and then start to roll up your sleeves and dive into the data to find out the why. Now, why could be as simple as, well, I think next year we'll double our business, and it's just not coming to fruition, whether it's macro or microeconomic issues that are retarding that growth. But a lot of times if it's like, hey, we want to grow 20%, we're on track, we're only growing 8%, you still have 9 months left of the year to course correct. Okay, maybe you'll only end up with 12% increase, but why would you ever just keep going along with bad execution? So I think that real-time data analysis and then the guts to pivot, to say, I was wrong. I thought that we should sponsor this thing and we got nothing from it. We're not doing that again. And a good example of that is trade shows and conferences. People go to those trade shows and conferences. They don't track what goes on. They spend a boatload in order to go there and attend and follow up and all that. And they just keep going without tracking and testing. However,